Welcome to r/RedditRevenge. This is a story of someone getting back at someone with revenge after being wronged. And today we have 3 great stories. So subscribe, hit the like button, and let's begin. The first story. Student relies on their partner to do most of the work in their thesis project, but after a year, partner is caught and found to have only done 10% of the work. The second story. A-hole boss refuses to pay me, so I get his cafe shut down. The third story. Neighbor drills at midnight, refuses to stop. I remove his apartment's fuse from the electrical box. The first story is, what happens when you expect all your thesis work to be done by others? Well, let's start at the beginning. I started a thesis project which took about a year, during the pandemic, so mostly in home office. I had 2 supervisors, 1 professor, and a PhD student. 2 people got into the project, me and let's call him Jack. Not to get into specifics about the project or degree, the work me and Jack had to do was transforming datasets into one big dataset using code. The big dataset would then have been used for our thesis project, but we had to create it ourselves. Because the overall project we were piggybacking our thesis of had already started a year prior, there were already transformed datasets by other students that were done or still working on it, relevant later on. Starting the project, I had no clue how to program anything really or use code, compared to him who sold himself as already knowing how to code in different languages, which makes me quite anxious and resulted in me putting a huge number of hours into teaching me how to do this very hyper-specific transformation. The way we split work was basically we had a group meetings every week, because there are a lot of pitfalls, especially in the beginning of doing this, and each dataset is unique. Basically, we had a pool of datasets we could choose from, pick one and mark it as being worked on. Dataset were very different, and some could have been consisting of maybe 30 variables, and be transformed fairly quickly, while others had 10k variables, and could take months. Numbers of variables transformed would be the best measure of work done. Fast forward, half a year and I completed 3 datasets, including one very big one, which overall had me transform like 15k variables. Took me ages and I still had other courses. Jack, on the other hand, completed 2 datasets, one with 20 variables and one with 50. After I realized this, I was stunned because we kind of bonded over the work, because it was frustrating and time-consuming. For half a year, he pretended that we basically were doing the same amount of work and had similar struggles. Well, I thought we still have half a year, there's still a really big data set open, and I kinda pushed him into doing that, so his participation was at least in the 10% range. Number of variables transformed. I continued to do small to mid-sized datasets, as I was not ready to provide the datasets for both of us, especially with how much work it took. The next few months we had meetings, he pretended to be working on datasets, even trying to get me to lie for him to the supervisor as we had to cross-check the datasets, which I couldn't do because he never sent them. On the other hand, when it came to other issues with the project, he always asked to do things together, which resulted in me only doing them. When I wanted something from him, simple quick things like 1 line of code, it would never arrive. Still hasn't. At some point I got very suspicious and started investigating. We had a common drive for the project in which you had to consistently add or change stuff when you worked on datasets. I could look into his past edits and realize that he has not been working on the big dataset, even though he was known claiming to be done with it. I'm not a snitch and am still not. However, after discovering this, I changed how to deal with him. First, I started mentioning things like why hasn't he uploaded the datasets that have been done for months, or why am I still not able to check them? Instead of privately asking him about it, which is what I had been doing since the beginning, but he would always find excuses, which I ate up. Well, after some passive pushing in that direction, the supervisors finally realized he's been lying for the past year and hasn't done SH. To summarize, up until this point, he basically lied for a year to me and others. Even after now finally doing datasets, he did maybe 10% of what I did. The dataset phase was over and now came the part of combining them and writing the thesis about it. Turns out, after having dealt with this stuff for about 400 hours, I became pretty good in handling datasets and understanding them. Spoilers. Jack was allowed to continue, and moving forward we had to combine the data, which was transformed by at least 8 different people, which as suspected came with a lot of issues. Our supervisors, I guess for me to push him through the project, suggested we do it together, which isn't gonna happen. I said that I'd be faster if we do it separately, as I could plan my time better. But if we have questions, we could help each other. Sure thing, buddy. Combining the data was an SH show. Everyone transformed their data somewhat differently using different code, tons of novel issues, etc. However, due to me being pretty proficient in this after doing another 100H of work to put it together, without data loss, double checking everything, and a lot more stuff that's very specific, I finally had the final dataset. I knew Jack would never ever get to this point, after finishing it. Plus we had to create slightly different datasets, which gave me the perfect excuse not to provide him with mine. Jack in the beginning asked some questions on how to do it, which I gave him general answers to, but the questions also showed me that he hasn't even started yet, and is still betting on getting my work and using that. Jack also had to continue transforming data because of his lying, and I had been determined for months not to help him or provide him with anything, and to do everything on my own for myself. During the group meetings, I first pretended to struggle and not being done yet. He always offered help, which I knew he couldn't give. I always said yeah, sure, and did not follow up on it. After asking a few more times for my data, which either I never replied to, said it would take a week, or just give him tips on problems he faced, he realized he's never going to get it. Fast forward, we write our thesis. I continue to not help him with anything, keeping to himself. We get our grades. He asked me if I pass. Of course I did, but guess who didn't? Yes, Jack. He sent why he didn't pass his thesis, and surprise, surprise, if you have no clue what you're doing because you barely work on it, you fail. He asked me for help in revising his thesis. I said sure I could look it, but I was on holiday for 2 weeks, and said I could help after. I obviously never intended to. We never spoke again. The end. The next story is, don't pay me, I'll ruin your business and have you heavily fined. So this happened a few months ago around November 2018. I was working at a small cafe as a kitchen porter. Basically washed dishes and helped out every so often in the kitchen anyway. I was supposed to be paid a week in hand, week after I get paid. As an 18-year-old in college ATM, I was more than happy getting about 50 pounds a week for a few hours of honestly easy work. One week I didn't get paid and asked my boss what was happening, and he just told me to bear with him as he had to do something quickly. I complied, and he asked me to cut up some chicken and veg whilst he had to quickly pop out. I go in the kitchen, open the fridge that was supposed to be for chicken only, and saw that it had a tray of just raw chicken sitting in blood with veg. Although I wasn't that involved in catering as much as I was a few years ago, I still knew this was disgusting and a clear breach of food safety. I quickly snapped a picture of everything that was just absolutely disgusting and against health and safety regulations, and took as many photos as I could. Somehow some of the photos got corrupted, so I only had 2 of them. Fast forward the next week, and my boss again asks when I was getting paid. This was getting close to Xmas, so I kinda needed the money for presents. He also owed me about 160 pounds at this point, as I did some overtime, and told me that if I came to see him on the Saturday coming up, was a Thursday, then he'll be able to pay me then. I messaged him on the Saturday asking where he was, and he just replied with be there in 5. 30 minutes pass, and he finally shows up and just gives me 50 pounds in cash and basically started to walk off. I asked him about the other 100 pounds, and basically just said that the shop was being closed for some electrical reworks, and that he'd be able to pay me then. Now, my mom walks past this cafe on her way back from work, and taking my sister to hockey training, and every time she did, she saw the place open with a few people, not customers, just chilling. She tells me and I'm annoyed, so I plot. My mate just suggested jokingly to put a brick through his windows and then ask for the money, or to just report him to both environmental health and the tax man, as he was paying me cash in hand with no wage slip. Basically, he was paying me illegally and tax-free. I couldn't go to the tax man as I'd be effing myself over too, but I like the idea of environmental health. Still had those pics. I make a report and receive a response basically saying how they'd look into it, and that they were grateful as this was actually the second store he owned that has been reported. The first one was closed but not told why. A week or so passes and basically the shop is never opened, and my mate looked into the charges that we knew he'd get, along with any others that he may get. Needless to say, it's most likely more than 100 quid. The next story is, wake me up at night, no power for you. For clarification, me is me. PSN is piece of SH neighbor. GF is first girlfriend. So about 8 years back, I was for a while living with my back then girlfriend. I used to work 3 jobs, 2 during the day, retail and IT help, and 1 on the nights during the weekend, Friday to Saturday and or Saturday to Sunday as a bouncer. I just started university and because of some mistakes got fed up pretty quickly and delved into a bit of working. However, working that much meant that I had a very tight sleeping schedule, always sleeping 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., which by law are the quiet hours where I live. At one of those wonderful nights, I suddenly get woken up by an incredibly loud sound right next to my head. I jump up in the bed and orient myself. After a few seconds, I identify that screeching noise as someone drilling into the wall next to the bed. Me looking at the clock, shortly past midnight, get peeved, and I ask if her neighbors are there. We quickly establish by ringing that none of the neighbors on the same floor are there. It's all small apartments usually rented by people from out of town, to be used only in case it's needed, and that the one living right above us is trying to sell his flat. Put 1 and 1 together and I figured out he's probably renovating. So I walk up 1 floor and ring the bell. The moment it rings, the drilling stops. Who would have thought? Me. Hey, sorry to disturb, but it's past midnight and I really need to sleep. Could you please respect the quiet hours and do that drilling in the morning? PON. It's none of your business what I do in my flat, so go and bother someone else. And slam the door in my face. I go back down, try to sleep, but the moment we get back in bed, the drilling starts again. Mind you, I was back then a very hot-headed fellow. My GF immediately gets up and tells me not to go up again. Just try to put some earplugs in and sleep. But I'm having none of it and waltz up the stairs and start ringing. Not once, but permanently. PON. What do you want? Stop bothering me. I have work to do. Him being quite angry. Me. Stop drilling or I'll call the police. Not necessarily being said in a calm way either. PON. Do what you want, but leave. And slams the door in my face again. Police won't do much because they have to witness it firsthand, and he can see them coming from his window. Only one access street. And as I mentioned, I used to be a bit hot-headed. Did you remember about the style of house? Old style. Oh yes, baby. Why was I so happy about that? Because that means that all the electrical fuses for all apartments of a floor were running into a central floor electrical service box thingy. No idea about the proper term, basically a huge fuse box, which can only be accessed by an electrical engineer, with the proper key or an extremely motivated, very handy guy with a toolbox, me. So I opened the fuse box of his floor and took out the ceramic fuse for his apartment. The drilling immediately stopped. Who would have thought? And then dropped it down the stairs. Falling 3 floors on concrete floor is not necessarily the best treatment. I closed the fuse box and went down and into bed. A few minutes later, the door rings. It's PON. My GF answers. I was standing in the bathroom listening to it. It's right next to the entrance door. PON. Is he living here? Tell me or I'll call the police. He got my fuse. GF. Who? No, I'm living alone. There's no guy here. What do you want in the middle of the night? PON starts to rant and scream about some hooligan threatening him and stealing his fuse, and now he can't drill in the middle of the night. GF. Drilling in the middle of the night? Isn't that against the law? Well, I'm busy. Stop bothering me because I have work to do. And close the door in his face. You might think it's over, but nope, it isn't. So PON gets a new fuse the next day and continues his flat improving. As soon as I hear it when I'm home, I have an idea, and go to the next electrical engineer and buy a box of the cheapest and weakest fuses that are allowed to be used in those flat-centered fuse box thingies. And guess what? Those things are so weak they can't power a proper hairdryer at the same time as your dishwasher is heating up. So don't even try to use any kind of power tools, while having a lot of lights on, and maybe a washing machine running. He burned through 5 or 6 fuses. Me always replacing his proper fuses with the cheap weak ones, who would burn in an instant when he tried to use anything big. Or maybe just wash his clothes and the dishes at the same time. Before my girlfriend saw him lurking on top of the stairs to see who was stealing them. It was quite fun and enjoyable. I don't miss him. The next story is, Contractor gets a $12,000 fine. Working in the construction trade is hard enough. Working for a contractor that thinks they can get away with saving money by not providing his workers a toilet is even worse. First off to state, this contractor's an a-hole. Thinks he's all high and mighty and will talk down to you every chance he gets. I do not normally work for this guy. Another coworker does. I just happen to be filling in. Not having a bathroom is something that I'm used to. It's an OSHA regulation, but I usually let it slide because driving to the nearest bathroom is like an extra long break. On this day in particular, I was in a fairly bad mood. I was tired, cranky, my stomach was in fits, and my contractor was just getting under my skin, a little too deep. Cue the grumbling stomach. I beeline out to my vehicle to get to the bathroom. Getting back to work, the contractor drilled into me for being gone too long and wasting time. Bad move, buddy. I wasn't having it. Cue my email to OSHA. Not even a day later, everyone is benefiting from a fresh new toilet on site, and the contractor fined $12,000. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the like button to support the channel.